And welcome back. I'm Doug Donnelly for Cecil TV. The condition of our local rivers has a direct impact on wildlife, recreation, and business. So keeping a close watch on the health of these waterways is vitally important. Joining us this evening to discuss how we are succeeding in protecting our watery ecosystem is George Kaplan from the Elk and Northeast Rivers Watershed Association. Welcome, George.
Thanks
Glad you could be here.
Yes, well, thanks for having me, Doug.
So, what is a watershed report card, which is
Okay.
what we're talking about?
Yeah, we just issued our report card that covers the data that we collected in our 2024 season. We always seem to be a year behind. It's 2025, but the report card says 2024 because that's what the data is based on. And so each year, this is our 6th report card, so each year we've issued one of these report cards that covers the 2 central rivers in the county, the Elk and the Northeast Rivers. And based on our measurements that we made last year, we have 10 sites on the Elk and 10 sites on the Northeast River that we take measurements on every month. And we measure 10 things at each site. So that adds up to 1,600 numbers or values that we base these report cards on. And using a standard scoring system that other watershed groups around the bay use, we're able to assign scores, not just for the individual measurements that we make, like phosphorus, nitrogen, oxygen, pH, turbidity, which is water clarity, but we can give overall scores for each of our 20 sites, and also overall scores for each of the 2 watersheds.
What is conductivity? I see got some pretty low marks for
Yes.
conductivity.
Yes, conductivity is exactly what it sounds. It's how well the water that we sample conducts electricity, and the more it conducts, the worse the water is, because pollutants that come into the water actually add to the conductivity of the water. So when the conductivity goes up, that means we got more bad things in the water. So yeah, we do not have very good conductivity scores, especially for the sites that are non-tidal. We sample both tidal and non-tidal sites. So we go all the way, our sites go all the way from the bay
Right.
Almost up to the Pennsylvania line.
I see that. Is there a predictability in scoring based on the distance from the bay?
No, it tends to go that the tidal sites have different scores than the upstream sites, but there's no real trend, that if you go upstream it gets worse or better.
Right.
Generally, what we find is the upstream sites are pretty good in terms of water clarity and oxygen content, but as you point out, their conductivity is high, and also the nitrogen content is high, which is not a good thing.
Right. So, how do you go about collecting the water samples?
Okay, well, as I mentioned, each site is measured by one of our volunteers. We have got about 15 volunteers, generally work in pairs. We sample each site at a specific date once a month. We have 4 instruments that we are able to measure things like pH, oxygen content, conductivity, and water clarity on site. And we collect samples that we send to the lab for nitrogen and phosphorus analysis. So in all, actually, we collect 10 measurements each time we go out.
I see. So your group concentrates on the Elk and Northeast rivers, and I guess and the things that feed them.
Yes.
But your data forms a larger picture for the Bay and beyond.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. All of our data is online. There's an entity called the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative that runs a website and a database, and all of the watershed organizations around the Bay contribute their data to this website, and all of the data is publicly available. And the URL for the website is in our report card. So you can actually see what we measure at every site if people want to do that. But the state of Maryland, the Department of the Environment, every 2 years harvests all of this data, and it goes into a statewide report on surface water quality. And it's open to other organizations also.
Both the Elk River and the Northeast River have, I guess, combined scores of B-. Is
yes.
that, as we know, grading systems, does that mean they are kind of average, or?
Yeah, it's not too different from what we're seeing around the Bay, especially on the eastern shore. Down on the lower shore, there's a large organization called Shore Rivers, which monitors 3 or 4, I guess 4, of the main rivers that are farther south than us, starting at the Sassafras. And we find that our scores are comparable to what they get for a lot of the rivers. We have somewhat different problems than they do. They have many more chicken farms down in the lower part of the Bay. We don't have so many up here, so we have less of a phosphorus problem than they have. And in addition, part of Cecil County is actually in the Piedmont. So there's some, that's a slightly different geological situation for the upstream part of the two rivers. And that can affect things like conductivity, which is different for the Piedmont than for the Atlantic coastal plain, for instance.
Right. Okay, so what part of Cecil County is the star student?
We have one site which goes through Fair Hill. It's called Grammy's Run. And because almost its entire watershed is wooded, it has pretty good water quality, and it has really, year after year, it has the best scores of any of our individual sites.
Great. And I guess with the low earner, we'll let that area remain.
Yeah. Well, as I said, the tidal sites and the non-tidal sites have different problems. The tidal sites, the water is very opaque most of the time, and that inhibits the growth of like underwater grasses and things that would feed a healthy ecosystem. The upstream sites, the non-tidal sites, the water tends to be clear, but on the other hand, they have the higher nitrogen content, as I mentioned before.
Right. And as you said before when we were talking, weather has an influence on this. That the more rainfall, the more stuff winds up in the water.
And it shows in our report cards. These last 2 years we've had, as most people know in the county, we've had extended dry spells. And that actually makes the water quality better because there's less rainwater runoff that's carrying pollutants down into the streams. So our overall scores for the two rivers are B-, which is the same as they were last year. And so that it's slightly better than it was the previous couple of years where they got scores of C.
Right. Okay. The last question is, and I would imagine this is kind of a question that might go through someone's head when either if they're a big supporter of the environment or a skeptic. And that would be, after all this data is collected, what actions have result?
Okay, so the Chesapeake Bay is under what a lot of people call a pollution diet. There are 3 measurements that are used as the main indicators of what the health of the bay is, and that's nitrogen, phosphorus, and water clarity. So the entire Chesapeake Bay program, as it's called, to improve the quality of water in the bay, monitors those 3 measurements in particular all around the bay to determine whether we're doing better for the bay as time goes on. And we've seen improvements in the bay, not drastic improvements, but we're sort of holding our own. For instance, in nitrogen, because a lot of money's been spent around the bay in various counties on improving septic systems and municipal wastewater systems to remove more of the nitrogen so that it doesn't get into the bay. Problem with nitrogen and phosphorus is it feeds algae blooms in the bay, which suck up the oxygen and prevent a healthy ecosystem. So it's part of a long-term project. You know, you can't take action on things that you don't measure. So our part of it is to make the measurements.
Great. Well, George.
Well, I do want to say how people can get a copy of the report card. The report card is a product of the Elk and Northeast Rivers Watershed Association. So if you go to the Elk and Northeast Rivers.org website, you will see a link there to all of the report cards that we've issued. And we're always interested in new members for the association, even if people want to get into water quality monitoring. We're open to new volunteers. And just send us an email or contact us, any other way, and we'd be happy to have more people.
Great. Well, George Kaplan is Program Coordinator for Water Sampling at the Elk and Northeast Rivers Watershed Association. Thank you, George.
Thanks, Doug, for having me. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Yep.
It's important information.